Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt on the morning after a terrible, terrible murder in Nashville of 6 victims, 3 children, 3 adults, by a 28-year-old woman who had legally purchased weapons. And so the debate will eventually evolve into arms control and guns control. And I'm going to talk with Senator Tom Cotton about that. Good morning, Senator. Welcome. As the father of small children, I'm sure this upsets you as much as it does any parent or grandparent.
Good morning, Hugh. It's a sad day in Nashville, a sad day for our country as we mourn with all of the families who lost loved ones at that school in Nashville and really their entire community there at this heartbreaking tragedy.
Can I ask you this is a technical question that I've seen discussed, and I don't know. It's a question of fact. If the Democrats, when they had their majority in the House and the Senate, had taxed AR-15 as the means of raising revenues, $1,000 a gun, and they had put that into the budget, and then they had added it as a reconciliation bill, would that, do you believe, pass the parliamentarians' review?
There's at least an arguable case that it could have, Hugh. I don't know ultimately how our parliamentarians would come down on it, but certainly there's an arguable case. But I think your point is well taken, that the Democrats frequently criticize Republicans for not confiscating weapons from law-abiding citizens, yet when they have political power, as they did for the past 2 years, they don't take action to do so themselves, in part because they realize that not only would it not solve the problems we have with mass murder in this country, it also would be infringement on the rights of law-abiding citizens.
But it is at least possible that that would be upheld. And was any effort made to do that when they had the reconciliation power, which is the power to bypass the 60-vote veto?
No, not to my knowledge, Hugh. Perhaps they discussed it internally and dropped it, but not to my knowledge.
Did they do anything on the Dreamers, another favorite of the left to bring up repeatedly? We've had a terrible tragedy in Juarez this morning. 37 people are dead at a refugee and immigrant center in Mexico, not in the United States, and many more are believed to be in danger of losing their life because of crowd conditions, whatever. Did they bring up the Dreamers? I don't mean whatever and dismissive. I just mean I don't know the facts.
No serious effort on my part. On my knowledge, Hugh, of course, there's always legislation introduced, but a serious effort would be bringing it up in committee to try to pass it out in committee and then Chuck Schumer bringing it to the floor. That was certainly not done, even though you probably could have gotten 60 votes or more. I mean, I've supported legislation in the past in the Trump era that the president asked me to help draft and support that would have given some kind of regularized status to adults who were brought here illegally when they were minors, but in return for things that would stop the problem in the long term, like building the wall and changing our asylum laws so the system can't be gamed and stopping chain migration. But there was no serious effort to try to forge that kind of compromise during the last 2 years for the Democrats.
So, Senator, you have been a legislator for 10 years on Capitol Hill. Is all seriousness gone from the body on the left? I mean, did they ever do anything with serious, purposeful intent to reach the center and pass something?
Well, Hugh, I think in my 10 years, I've seen the steady drift leftward of the Democratic Party on really radicalized issues. You know, things today, Barack Obama, much less Bill Clinton, took positions when they were running for president or even when they were president that they would have them excommunicated from the Democratic Party. And as they drift further and further to the left and further away from the mainstream of America, then they begin to focus more and more on what I would say are tiny, trivial issues that don't address the urgent and pressing challenges of our day, such as tackling inflation or controlling crime or standing up to aggressive Russia and China and Iran.
And are they apologetic about that? I just don't think people understand the collapse of seriousness in the Democrats.
I've not heard any apologize to me, Hugh. I'm not sure how they feel in their private moments. Normally, the Democrats in the Congress are pretty committed to carrying Joe Biden's water.
Now, the president had a very bad moment yesterday when all the networks were informed he would address the shooting in Nashville, and they all carried it live, and he did 4 minutes of stand-up comedy before he turned to it. And I was talking about it with Molly Hemingway. It just strikes me that he is losing the ability to communicate with the American people, not because he has dementia. I just think he's old. Have you noticed that?
it keeps getting worse, Hugh. I mean, it's worse than it was a year ago when he went to Poland and extemporized that the United States should see regime change in Russia. I said at the time he should just stop speaking extemporaneously and off the cuff in public. He hasn't taken that advice yet, but he has. I think the White House has substantially reduced the amount of time that he's speaking extemporaneously or off the cuff in public, and that embarrassing moment that we all witnessed yesterday is probably a reason why. And I'll just put it simply, Joe Biden is too old to be president, and a vote for Joe Biden is a vote for Kamala Harris.
I think you're right. And I hope people understand that. Now, if I can switch to one more technical thing about the Senate. It's a very small group of people. It's a club. And two of your members of your club are infirm as well, John Fetterman and Dianne Feinstein. They're not going to work. What does that do to the work of the Senate?
Well, first off, Hugh, there's obviously a big difference between being the commander-in-chief and being one of 100 senators.
Correct.
You don't have in the Senate. You're not on the potential, urgent action to defend our nation. So I wish Senators Fetterman and Senators Feinstein a full and complete recovery. We never wish ill on anyone, even our political adversaries and rivals. But to have two Democrats down, of course, makes it, in effect, evenly split Senate once again, and it complicates the abilities of the Democrats to move their most controversial nominees across the Senate floor. For instance, two of them have gone down in the last month. A radical nominated chair of the Federal Communications Commission and an unqualified nominee to lead the Federal Aviation Administration. I do suspect, based on the reports I've heard, that Senator Fetterman and Senator Feinstein will recover and be back at work eventually. But there is a big difference between being one of 100 senators and being the President of the United States. We've had cases in the past, like Tim Johnson from South Dakota or Mark Kirk from Illinois, who suffered strokes and were absent for a long time. And, of course, that deprived their party of that vote on the floor. Their offices kept serving their states. But that's obviously not a situation that would be tenable if you had a president who suffered from that kind of condition.
Well, I remember when Strom Thurmond was making his record bid to be the oldest senator ever, and he was led around by staff and he voted, but he was there. I'm not trying to connect Joe Biden's performance yesterday with these senators. I just want, is anything getting done? Are they nominating and are they approving any judges?
So actually, Senator Feinstein's absence from the Judiciary Committee has stalled all but the most bipartisan nominees, because the Democrats have to have all senators on the committee in person present voting yes to get the nominee on that committee, unless Republicans give them votes in committee. So I think typically we have one session a week on the Judiciary Committee when we vote out nominees. I think it's been 2 or 3 weeks now since we've done that. So they're starting to run out of judges on the floor to confirm. They're also getting to a point where the president's going to have to start compromising with senators in states like Arkansas with 2 Republicans if he wants to continue to confirm district court nominees.
Have they put forward any kind of conversation with you? Normally in California, that process has been for years. When a Republican is in, we get one, they get one. Is that what they're doing with Arkansas?
We've had preliminary discussions, Hugh. I mean, we're not obviously the size of California, so there are not nearly as many vacancies. But I think that the White House understands that when you're talking about Republican states, 2 Republican senators like Arkansas or Louisiana, Tennessee, Mississippi, and so forth, they're going to have to compromise and provide a list of nominees that are acceptable to the 2 Republican senators from those states. And, we're not looking for partisan ideologues. I never look for partisan ideologues on the court. Looking for jurists who will enforce the law as it's written and uphold the Constitution as it was originally understood.
During my 30 years of practice, I appeared in front of a number of judges. Some of them were nuts, and some of them were great, and it never depended upon party affiliation. Never. I knew what their ideology was, but you can find competent trial judges everywhere.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, a lot of it is a matter of competence and character and integrity. Trial judges are not setting precedent that affects numerous states like the courts of appeals do, and certainly the Supreme Court. But they have vast discretion on evidentiary rulings or preliminary motions that are nearly unreviewable. And you certainly want to make sure that you get men and women of character and discernment and integrity. Having worked for an appellate judge, I remember an old joke that I heard among some of the judges on the Fifth Circuit what's the difference between God and a United States district judge? And the answer is God doesn't think he's a United States district judge.
Last question for you, Senator. I'm going to teach today the Lochner era, Lochner to West Coast Hotel. And that is the rise of laissez-faire through the repeal of laissez-faire by the court, all judge made. I'm going to begin by talking about the Second Amendment. If someone brought forth an amendment to repeal the Second Amendment, seeking the 2/3 vote in the House and the Senate necessary to send it to the states for 3/4 vote, how many senators do you think would vote for that?
Not many, Hugh. Maybe, obviously, no Republicans. And you might get half of the Democratic caucus to vote for it. I don't know, maybe 2/3.
And so every conversation about gun control has got to begin with the Second Amendment because it's not going anywhere, right? When I hear people say we've got to do something, they got to understand if they mean confiscating guns, they've got to start with the Second Amendment, and they never do.
Yeah, they start with the Second Amendment, and they have to accept the precedent on the Second Amendment. The Democrats have a habit in Supreme Court hearings of always celebrating the precedents they like as so-called super precedents.
Yes.
They could never possibly repeal, no matter how bad they were decided and how badly they had divided our society and wrenched the law out of recognition, as Roe v. Wade had. But they never want to defend precedents that they don't like Citizens United or the recent Second Amendment cases going back 15 years that make plain that the Second Amendment means exactly what it says, that every American has an individual right to own firearms and carry them and use them to defend himself and his or her family.
And that's Heller and that's McDonald, and they are good law. And unless and until someone steps up and says we've got to change that, it will not work. Senator Cotton, next week we'll talk about court packing because Israel's issue, but not this week. Thank you for joining me.